The following presentation is on the book To Kill a Mockingbird, written by Harper Lee in 1960. In order to understand the book, there are some important contextual things that you need to understand. Hopefully, this presentation will give you some greater background knowledge and make it easier for you to understand this text. Before we continue, you're going to need the following materials: a regular notebook, something to write with, and a quiet setting. Feel free to pause and copy notes from the PowerPoint, and then resume play to listen to my explanations. If you're ready to continue, we can move forward. Being racist versus portraying racism. It's important that I get this out there early. As you read, you will frequently encounter characters using the N-word in a racist and derogatory manner. Does this mean that the book is racist? Actually, we read To Kill a Mockingbird for its accurate and painful representations of racism. In determining whether a text is racist, you need to look for the author's greater purpose. Are they using the N-word out of hatred or to get a laugh? That would make a text racist. Instead, Harper Lee portrays her home state with a sense of shame and criticizes racist perspectives. So we decide that this book is not being racist, but rather that it is portraying racism. The book takes place in Alabama during both the Jim Crow era and the Great Depression. These two things overlap. The Jim Crow era is used to refer to the time period roughly between the abolition of slavery and the Civil Rights Movement. So, between the time when slaves were freed and when black people were given civil rights. The novel also takes place in Alabama during the Great Depression. The Great Depression, which we've previously discussed, was a time of immense economic struggle. Historical studies show that racism and xenophobia, right, fear of others or fear of outsiders or foreigners, peak during times of economic struggle. Essentially, when people are panicking about money, they start to blame others and people who don't look like them. Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was the name of a popular character in blackface. In minstrel shows in the South, people used to dress up and put on makeup to look like black people and portray them in really racist ways. So even the title Jim Crow refers to a form of racism. Jim Crow laws enforced racial segregation under the concept of separate but equal. So blacks were legally required to be second-class citizens under the guise that it was actually equal, even though they were separate. You should have heard about this in your history classes. Two examples of Jim Crow laws. Alabama made it illegal for black and white people to play cards, dice, dominoes, or checkers together in 1930. If your grandparents are 87 or older, they were alive for this. A lot of times it's very easy to think of racism and slavery and legal racism as in the past. But it's not that far from our current history. Another example, because we can always run into the trap of thinking racism was just in the South. Connecticut legally upheld racial segregation in 1935. So if your grandparents are 82 or older, they were alive for this. Lynch mobs. Throughout the South, the KKK and lynch mobs were domestic terrorist organizations that killed and intimidated black Americans by burning crosses and hanging people. These mobs were run by civilians outside of the law based on the concept of white supremacy. So if you can imagine, as you've seen in pop culture, groups of people with torches and pitchforks, right, that kind of gives you the idea of what a lynch mob might look like. Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old black American from Chicago. In 1955, he visited family in Mississippi. Emmett spoke to a married 21-year-old store clerk, a white female, who was running a grocery store where he was shopping. Emmett was kidnapped, beaten, mutilated, shot, and drowned. The men who murdered him were legally found not guilty. The case drew national attention. Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird in 1960, and you can see some of the similarities between the Emmett Till case and the book as you progress. A coming of age novel. To Kill a Mockingbird is an example of a coming of age novel, or a Bildungsroman, if you want to get technical. A coming of age novel is a novel with a main character on the verge of adolescence. Over the course of the novel, they leave their childlike nature behind and mature based on the lessons they have learned. The main character, Scout, develops and matures over the course of the novel and leaves her childlike ways behind.